Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I also share with the honourable gentleman from Poole surprise that the coalition have lasted this long. But I'm grateful for the opportunity to comment on the gracious speech, and I also congratulate the mover and seconder for the loyal address, for the skill, flair and wit with which they have discharged their tasks. And having read the bill, I mean, there are issues which I can have no difficulty with: the modern slavery, Syria, sexual violence and conflict, and of course the statement on the UK, which reads that the Government will continue to implement new financial powers for the Scottish Parliament and make the case for Scotland to remain a part of the United Kingdom. For those members on the benches opposite, and indeed in the benches that I occupy, if you're not following closely the Caledonian debate, it might interest you to know and surprise you that the Scottish National Party are not focusing on the constitutional aspect of the change that they're asking people to undertake. They're actually putting it in party political terms. Because people of Scotland don't necessarily favour the Conservatives, and probably in electoral terms you'll have noticed that you've only got one member, they are saying that you should vote for independence because you'll no longer have the Tories anymore. What people like me say is that I don't want the Tories, but I don't want the SNP either. So I'm equally comfortable challenging their policies. And it's important because, as I explained to constituents and I explained to others when we were doing public meetings, I wasn't around in 1707 when the Act of Union was created. I doubt I'll be around unless cryogenics play a part and they freeze my brain or something like that. I doubt I'll be around in 2314. And constitutions are forever. Party politics change. And no doubt there will be future Labour governments, hopefully in May 2015, and no doubt there will be future Conservative administrations. And we have to explain to people the differences between that party political debate and the constitutional issues that we're being asked to make a judgment on, well, Scots are, on September 18. And therefore I have had no difficulty standing foursquare with Conservative colleagues. I've recently shared a platform with the Department for International Development Secretary, the Secretary of State for the Department for International Development, both of us putting the case for why we should stay in the Union. Because I think if we are going to move into a new era of politics, then we shouldn't be ashamed of saying to people, in some instances, we will agree on issues, and the parties who believe in the United Kingdom believe that Scotland is much better as part of that UK rather than separating on 18 September. And I'm confident, but not complacent, that if we work hard, we will be able to secure Scotland's place in the United Kingdom and will wake up as part of the Union on the 19th of September 2014. But much, Madam Deputy Speaker, of the content of the gracious speech is motherhood and apple pie. For example, I really don't know what it means that the Government will continue to work to build a fairer society, nor does it really matter to me that the Right Honourable Member for Gordon claimed that that's the type of inserts that the Liberal Democrats had got into the gracious speech. Because the content of the Queen's speech is light, as far as I'm concerned, on the issues that affect my constituents and many millions of people across the UK. Now, I'm not quite as sophisticated as other members in this chamber when I look around, but the coalition partnership started to the backdrop of an Australian-Scots 1978 hit record, John Paul Young, Love is in the Air, in the Rose Garden of Downing Street. And now, as far as I can see, it's going to end with the opening bars of Tammy Wynette's DIVORCE. I'd like to congratulate the Government on meeting their economic targets. I'd also like to congratulate the Government on reducing the deficit, and I'd like to congratulate the Government on getting the balance right between austerity and growth. But sadly, I can't do any of that, because once you remove the, in my opinion, empty rhetoric of the long-term economic plan, which has been parroted at every Prime Minister's questions by members opposite, and is even included in the gracious speech, even a perfunctory analysis shows that the Government's record on the economy is pretty pitiful. We were told that one of the reasons that this Government needed a 5-year term in office was so that by the end of that term, the Government deficit would be eliminated. And we were told that the harsh austerity measures agreed by the coalition would have had sufficient time to work. The Chancellor may want to claim that he met his target for last year, with borrowing reduced to £107.7 billion against a target of £107.8 billion But let's not forget that the target he set for that year in 2010 was £60 billion. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, with the World Cup approaching, an appropriate analogy is to say that he has had to move the goalposts in order to score, and even then, he's only got the ball just underneath the bar. And that is why, without mentioning, of course, during the gracious speech or any other contributions, the Government don't mention that the UK debt has continued to rise, having reached £1,185 billion in 2012-13, or, to put it in another way, £18,606 per head of population in the UK. Surprisingly, Madam Deputy Speaker, no mention of that either in the gracious speech. And what's more, and this is very important, the deficit or the debt is forecast to continue to rise for the next 5 years. So I would like to ask the rhetoric question, is that also part of the long-term economic plan? We were told that welfare reform, as my honourable friend has mentioned a few moments ago, was one of the key areas that the Government would focus on, with the introduction of the work programme, described as a flagship policy, again as my right honourable friend has described, and that would simplify the processes and get people off benefits and back into work. But the record shows that the work programme has not been a success, and there is compelling information that intervention through the work programme is less successful than doing absolutely nothing. Indeed, the latest figures show that for the first 2 years of the project, that every target was missed and only 100,000 people out of 1.2 million people who were enrolled in the programme actually found work. That's not my measure of success. It might be the members' bench's opposite's measure. We have also discovered that Right Honourable Member for Chingford and Woodford Green's plans to simplify benefits and tax credits has also hit the buffers. And it's the sole government project out of 200 that has been reset. Yes, Minister, as often mentioned when we have debates in the House, and perhaps being reset is, yes, Minister, jargon in plain old English for those who are responsible for the project to go back to the drawing board and start again. Because it was discovered last year that the original £2 billion cost of the project, identified in the 2011-15 spending review, has risen to a staggering, Madam Deputy Speaker, £12.8 billion over the same period. And the Government still attempts to claim that it's economically competent. There's a phrase in Glasgow that you're probably familiar with, Madam Deputy Speaker, given your origins, and it is you couldn't give the members opposite a brass neck with a blowtorch. As for the Government's claim in the gracious speech that it wishes to build a fairer society, that view isn't shared by World War II veteran Harry Smith, who told the Today programme this morning what life was like before the welfare state existed, and how he is shocked and saddened by the growth of poverty in this country today. In the gracious speech, we have the fewest number of bills since 1950, and I accept, like the honourable member that I followed, that legislation isn't also always the answer to every problem that we face. But there are problems out there that require legislation to fix them, and the Government isn't doing anything about them in this gracious speech. What we should be hearing about is more measures to help ordinary people, rather than tax cuts for the richest people in our society. We should be hearing about measures to help people with fuel bills, to replace part-time and zero-hours contract jobs with full-time jobs which offer financial compensation, which treat people with dignity. We don't know the detail of it, but I look forward with interest to hearing the plans for the minimum wage. But we should enforce the minimum wage. And more than that, we should actually encourage employers to pay their staff a living wage, rather than subsidising low pay through tax credits. There should also be a jobs guarantee for the young unemployed, of whom, Madam Deputy Speaker, there are far, far too many. And we need to tackle the housing market. I fundamentally disagree with the contribution of the Right Honourable Member for Wokingham. In my area, the reason that there's a shortage of houses is because of the Right to Buy scheme. Because the money generated from the Right to Buy scheme was never allowed to be used again to rebuild new houses and to create the homes for the future and the opportunities for young people that I see in my constituency who don't have the chance to get a flat or a back and front door house. There are 16,000 people in the waiting list in South Lanarkshire Council. There are nearly 6,000 people on a waiting list in my constituency alone. And instead of tackling that problem, we are putting money into the Help to Buy scheme, which will create, in my opinion, a price bubble which we will see will cause problems in the future. We need to make much better use of a £7 billion housing benefit budget that rewards private landlords with higher rents, but doesn't invest in one new brick. And we need to satisfy that fundamental desire for people to have their own roof and walls, not just to give them the ability to buy a home with higher wages, but also to allow them to make a choice to have a steady rent and the security of tenure in a clean environment. None of these issues are addressed in the gracious speech. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, it may be left, or it will be left, I should say, to the next Labour government in May 2015 to introduce legislation to tackle these problems. But let me start, or end, I should say, where I started. And to use the orthographic style of Tammy Wynette's biggest hit, the people of Britain will regard this Queen's speech as a DISASTER.
David Amos.
I welcome